All right, the first thing I want to do is to create a new folder here in the root called app. I'm going to put all of our application source code inside this folder. This is a good practice to follow because with this, we can separate our application code from the code that is automatically generated by our tooling. Let's say tomorrow something crazy happens with this project. We can create a brand new React Native project and simply copy our application code into that project, okay? So here's our app folder. Let's move the assets folder inside this folder. Now we need to go to app.json and update the path to these two images. So app/assets, and one more time, save. Let's make sure that everything is working properly. Good. So in our app folder, let's add a new folder called screens. I like to add all our screen components inside this folder. This is a convention that a lot of React Native developers follow. You don't have to follow it if you don't like it. So in the screens folder, let's add a new file called welcome screen. Look at the naming convention I'm using to name this file. So for these components, I like to use the word screen in the file and the component's name. Now, here we want to implement a function component. Earlier in the course, I told you to install this extension, React Native React Redux Snippets. With this extension, we can quickly type code. So throughout the course, I'm going to use the shortcuts that come with this extension. You can always learn about these shortcuts down below or on the GitHub page of this project, okay? So here's an example. We type RSF, that is short for React Stateless Function. Now we have the basic template for a function component with multi-cursor editing enabled. So here we can rename this component if we want to. Once we're done, we press the escape button to disable multi-cursor editing. Now, first we want to add an image background component here. So let's delete the div element. We type image background. Here we have auto import. So let's import this. Now we need to set the source of this image. So source equals, here we call the require function. Now currently we are in the screens folder. So let's go one level up. Now we go to assets and load background.jpg. Okay. Save the changes. Now we should give this component a style. So after this component, I'm going to type RNSS, that is short for React Native Style Sheet. So this quickly generates this code, stylesheet.create. We store the result in this object styles, and unfortunately, this is not imported on the top, so we have to manually import it, style sheet. Okay, so in this object, we're going to have a bunch of key value pairs. So let's add a new key value pair called background. This is where we're going to add all the styles for our image background component. So I'm going to set flex to 1. So this image background takes the entire screen. Okay, now here we set our style to styles.background. Save. Let's go to our app component and render our welcome screen. So I'm going to delete all the code here. We don't need it anymore. So we type welcome screen and have VS Code automatically imported on the top. Beautiful. Let's see what we get. So here's our background image. Now let's add our buttons. So over here, inside this component, we're going to add a view. Let's give it a style. So we're going to set this to styles.login button. Now, let's create that over here. So as you see, I'm not writing inline styles anymore. I like to separate these. So login button. Let's set its width to 100% and its height to 70 pixels. The background color should be. Now let me look at my cheat sheet. So that's going to be FC5C65. Save the changes. We can find variable view because we didn't import it on the top. So let's add it to this list. Save. So our button is currently on the top. We want to put it down below over here. How do we do that? Well, earlier we talked about flex direction. So by default, flex direction is set to column. So our primary axis is this vertical line. Now I told you that using justify content, we can align items along the primary axis. So we go to the styles for our container, which is this background image. Here we set justify content to flex end. The default value is flex start. That is the reason why our button appears here on the top. So we set this to flex end, save the changes. Now our button is here, beautiful. Let's duplicate this to add the second button. I'm going to rename this to register button. Now let's duplicate these styles and rename this to register button. I'm going to use the same width and height, but change the background color to 4ECDC4. Now you might be thinking I'm typing too fast, but at this point you should have already done your exercise. You shouldn't code along with me. So I don't want to waste a lot of people's time by typing really slowly, okay? So save the changes. Here's our second button, beautiful. Now we need to add the logo on the top, but here's a problem. If we add the logo, because we set justify content to flex end, our logo is going to end up here. So how do we put it on the top? This is where we can use absolute positioning. So we can position the logo relative to its parent, which is this background image. So let's add an image here, image. Now let me show you something. In this case, auto import didn't work because I selected this item with this blue icon. So if you look on the right side, we don't have auto import. Sometimes this happens in the context menu that appears here. So look, we have two image instances. The second one with the orange icon has auto import. So make sure to select that one. So now you can see images imported on the top. So here I'm using the self-closing syntax because we're not going to put anything inside this image. Now let's set its source. Once again, we use the require function. We go to the assets folder and load logo-red.png. Let's test the result up to this point. Our logo is way too big, so let's give it a couple of styles. We set style to styles.logo. Now, over here, and by the way, note that I'm sorting these keys. So we have background, login button, logo, and so on. This makes it easier to maintain your applications. So let's set the size of this logo to 100 by 100. So width is 100 and height is 100 as well. Save. Okay, this is good. Our logo is down below. Now we should use absolute positioning. So I'm going to set position to absolute. And let's put this 50 pixels from the top of the screen. So here's what we get. We can push it down a little bit. Let's say 70. That is better. But how do we put it in the center? Well, earlier we talked about the primary and the secondary axis in Flex. So our primary axis is the vertical line and the secondary axis is the horizontal line. Using what property can we align items along the secondary axis? Using align items. So we go to our container over here. We set align items to center. And with this, we can align items along the secondary axis. Take a look. Now the image is right in the middle of the screen. Beautiful. So finally, we need to add our tagline below this logo. So let's add a text component. So we have this orange icon here, so we can automatically import this. What was our tagline? Sell what you don't need. Save. Our text appears here. So what we need to do is to put the text and the logo inside a container and apply absolute positioning on that container, okay? So let's add a new view here. Then we're going to move the image and text components inside this view. So with these lines selected, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and then press the up arrow. With this, we can move code, okay? So now let's apply a style here. We can say styles.logo container, whatever you want to call it. Now let's create this. So here's logo. Now we create logo container. This is very simple. I just want to move these two properties inside this object. Let's see what happens. So our text is in the right position, but our logo is not exactly in the middle of the screen. This happened because once we added this new container, the alignment of this container is reset to flex start by default. So in this container, once again, we need to set align items to center so we can align the items along the secondary or the horizontal axis. Take a look. And here's the final result. In the next section, we're going to apply a bunch of styles to make this screen pretty. Now, if you want my source code, you can get it from the zip file that I gave you at the beginning of the course in the first section. That zip file contains all the source code that we're going to write throughout this course. So every section has a start and a finish folder where you can find the relevant source code.